Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting Unit 2 of Class 12th NCERT of Indian Society, that is Demographic Structure of Indian Society. Alright, let us start with a very basic question. What exactly is demography? In simple words, demography is a study of people, but not just people as individuals. It studies the people as a population. It looks at how many people are there, how many are born, how many die, how many migrate, what is the balance between men and women, and what is the age structure of society. The word demography comes from the Greek word, that is demos means people and graphin means describe. So literally demography means describing people. Now demography is studied in two ways. First is formal demography, which deals with numbers, statistics, graphs and calculations. And second is social demography, which asks deeper questions such as how education, economy, culture, gender and class influence population trends. So, and where does all this information come from? From one of the most powerful tools of the modern state, that is the census, where every single person in the country is counted. Now, demography is not just important on its own, it's actually played a major role in the birth of sociology itself. Let us go back to the 18th century in Europe. It was a time when nation states were emerging and government were becoming stronger, and also capitalism and industrialization were expanding. To rule effectively, governments needed information about their people. How many people live here, how healthy are they, and how much tax can be collected. So government started collecting social statistics. This need led to the development of modern census. The first modern census was conducted in America in 1790. Later, European countries followed, and in India, the British began census exercises between 1867 to 72, and from 1881 onwards, India started conducting a census every 10 years. Even after independence, India continued this tradition. An interesting fact for UPSC, India conducts the largest census in the world because even China does not do it regularly. So you can see how demography became a foundation for sociology as a scientific subject. Now some students ask a very practical question. Why is all this counting of people so important? The first reason is planning. The government used demographic data to plan schools, hospitals, housing, employment and welfare schemes. But for sociology, the importance is much deeper. Demography helped sociology become scientific. When we study things like birth rate, death rate or suicide rate, we are not studying individuals. We are studying the patterns. A famous sociologist, Emile, proved this through his study on suicide. He showed that suicide rates differed based on religion and social integration, not just personal depression. This proved one powerful idea, that is, society has its own laws and patterns that go beyond individuals' choice. This is why demographic data is so important in sociology. Now, let us clearly separate two ideas. That is, formal demography answers questions like how many people, how fast is population growing, and what is the death rate. But social demography asks why is population growing faster in some regions and why is fertility higher among certain groups. For example, formal demography may tell us that birth rates are high in some states, but social demography explains that it is due to poverty, lack of education, patriarchy, or cultural beliefs. So remember this clearly for exams. Formal demography means numbers. Social demography is reasons behind the numbers. Both are important, but sociology focuses more on the second. Now comes one of the most famous theory in demography, that is Malthusian theory. Thomas Robert Malthus was an English economist who lived in the late 18th century. He argued something very pessimistic. According to him, population grows geometrically, like 2, 4, 8, 16. And also food production grows arithmetically, like 2, 4, 6, 8. So population will always grow faster than food supply. As a result, poverty, hunger and misery are unavoidable. Malthus said population could be controlled in two ways, that is, preventive checks such as delay marriages and celibacy, and positive checks such as famine, war and disease. In simple words, if humans don't control population, nature will do it brutally. This theory influenced population debates for a long time. However, when we look at history, Malthus' predictions did not come true. From the late 19th century onwards, agricultural productivity increased and also technology improved and industrial farming expanded. Food production increased faster than population in many countries. Living standards also improved, and they argued that poverty is not caused by population growth but by unequal distribution of resources. The problem is not too many people but too few controlling too much. So today, Malthus is seen as important historically but limited in explanation. Now we come to a more balanced and widely accepted theory, that is demographic transition theory. This theory explains population change in relation to economic development. According to this theory, every society passes through three stages. In the first stage, both birth rate and death rate are high, so population growth is slow. In second stage, death rates fall rapidly due to better health, sanitation and nutrition, but birth rates remains high. This leads to the population explosion. In the third stage, both birth and death rates fall and population stabilizes. India is currently in second stage and moving slowly towards the third. Now let us understand some basic demographic terms. Birth rate refers to the number of live birth per 1000 people in a year. Death rate refers to the number of deaths per 1000 people. The difference between the two gives us the rate of natural increases. When this difference becomes zero, population stabilizes, call it replacement level. Some countries like Japan and Italy have even reached the negative growth. Fertility rate refers to the number of live birth per 1000 women aged 15 to 49. Total fertility rate or TFR means the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, expected to have in her reproductive years. Now let us look at some social indicators. That is, infant mortality rate shows the number of infants dying before 1 year of age per 1000 live births. Maternal mortality rate shows deaths of women during childbirth, and high infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate indicates the underdevelopment. So life expectancy shows overall quality of life. Sex ratio is extremely important in India and it shows the number of females per 1000 males. Globally, women outnumber men, but India is an exception due to son preference and neglect of girl children, and decline in sex ratio is a serious social warning sign. Now, population is not just about numbers, it is also about age structure. Developing countries usually have a young population. As development increases, societies start aging. The dependency ratio tells us how many people depend on the working population. If working population is high, it creates a demographic dividend. India currently enjoys this advantage, but this dividend is temporary. Today's youth will become tomorrow's elderly, so employment generation is crucial. Now, India is the second most populous country in the world. According to the 2011 census, India's population was about 1.21 billion. And also latest data, India is the most populous country. Between 1901 and 1951, population growth was slow. Between 1911 and 1921, population even declined due to the influenza epidemic, which killed over 12 million people. After independence, growth increased rapidly. From 1961 to 1981, growth was around 2.2%, showing clear demographic transition. The decline in death rate happened mainly due to medical advancement, vaccination, control of epidemics, and better transport and relief system. Famines becomes less frequent, and Amartya Sen pointed out that famines are due to lack of access, not lack of food. And schemes like MGNREGA were introduced to fight hunger and starvation. Now, birth rate declined slowly because fertility is influenced by culture and mindset. And education, urbanization and women empowerment reduce fertility. And southern and western states have achieved replacement level fertility. Northern states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh still have high fertility. An important fact for UPSC, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar alone will contribute nearly half of the India's population growth till 2041. Now let us understand the age structure of a population. Age structure simply tell us how a country's population is distributed across different age groups, such as children, working adults and the elderly. And this is very important because it decides its future economy, social policies and even political priorities. India is often described as a young nation, and this description is not just emotional, it is supported by data. If you look back to 1971, nearly 42% of India's population was below 15 years of age. Over time, this proportion has been steadily declining. By 2001, it came down to 35%, while the working age group roughly between 15 and 60 years increased at to almost 59%. At the same time, the elderly population, though still small, has been slowly increasing from about 5% to 7%. The projection suggests that by 2026, children will form only around 23%, while the elderly population will rise to nearly 12%. What does this tell us? India's population pyramid is slowly changing. The base is narrowing and the upper part is widening. In simple words, India is gradually aging thought it is still young compared to developed countries. This transition has serious implications for employment, pension, healthcare, and long-term planning. Now, one mistake we should never make while studying India is assuming that all regions behave the same way. India is not one demographic story. It is many stories happening at the same time. Take Kerala for example. Kerala's age structure looks very similar to that of a developed country. It has fewer children, a large working age group, and rising elderly population. This is the result of early investment in education, healthcare, and women's empowerment. Now compare this with Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. These states have a very wide base in their population pyramid, meaning a very large number of children and youth and a relatively smaller elderly population. So if you usually imagine the population pyramid, Kerala's pyramid is wider in the middle and Uttar Pradesh pyramid is wider at the bottom, and India as a whole lies somewhere in between. Now comes one of the most discussed and most understood concept, that is India's demographic dividend. Demographic dividend simply means that a country has a large proportion of people in the working age group and relatively fewer dependents. This creates a potential opportunity for rapid economic growth. In 2020, the average age of an Indian was just 29 years. Compare this with China and US around 37 years and Western Europe around 45 years and Japan nearly 48 years. This comparison shows why the world sees India as a future economic powerhouse. A younger population means more workers, more innovation, more consumptions, and more productivity if managed properly. But remember, this dividend is not guaranteed. It is only possibility, not a promise. So, how exactly does this demographic dividend work? When a country has more working people and fewer dependents, the dependency ratio declines. This means fewer children and elderly people are dependent on each working individual. As a result, household savings increases, government spends less on basic welfare, and more money is available for investment and growth. However, here is a crucial point. Demography only creates potential. Whether that potential turns into growth depends on education, skill development, healthcare, and job creation. If young people are educated but unemployed, frustrated, or unhealthy, then the demographic dividend can easily turn into demographic disaster. Now let us talk honestly about the challenges. India's dependency ratio has definitely improved from 79 in 1970 to around 64 in 2005, and it may drop further to 48 by 2025. But after that, it will start rising again due to population aging. At the same time, employment growth has slowed down. Between 1987 and 1994, youth employment was growing at about 2.4% annually, but after 1994, it dropped sharply to 0.7% in rural areas and just 0.3% in urban areas. This means we have young people but not enough quality jobs. So market focuses alone cannot solve this problem. Planned state intervention in education, skilling, and employment is absolutely necessary. Now let us move to one of the most disturbing aspects of India's demography, that is sex ratio. Globally, nature produces slightly more females than males and men tend to live longer. So normally countries have more women than men, but India is an exception. Our sex ratio declined from 1972 females per thousand males in 1901 to 933 in 2001 and thought it improved slightly to 943 in 2011. The overall picture remains worrying. This imbalance is not biological, it is socially created. The situation becomes even more alarming when we look at the child sex ratio. Between 1991 and 2011, it dropped from 1945 to 919. This clearly indicates that girls are being eliminated before birth or in early childhood. States like Haryana show extremely low ratios, around 793 girls per thousand boys. What is shocking is that even socially progressive states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu have witnessed a decline. This proves one important sociological lesson, that is, economic growth alone does not automatically produce social justice. Why is this happening? Not because women are dying during the childbirth or maternal mortality has actually declined. The real cause lie in son preference, dowry system, inheritance practices, misuse of technology like ultrasound. Ironically, richer states show worse sex ratios because they afford sex selection technology. So development without value change can worsen social problems. To address this, the government introduced the Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act in 1996, later strengthened it in 2003, and schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao aim to change attitudes and encourage education of girls. But sociology teaches us one hard truth, that is, laws can regulate behavior, but they cannot change mindset overnight. That change must come from society itself. Now let us talk about literacy, one of the strongest tools of empowerment. Literacy gives people awareness, confidence, and ability to participate in democracy. After independence, India made significant progress, and today nearly two-thirds of Indians are literate. But because our population keeps growing, maintaining and improving literacy requires continuous effort. Now, the good news is that female literacy is rising faster than male literacy, but the gap still remains huge, about 16%. Social groups like SC and STs lag behind, and states like Bihar still trail far behind Kerala. The most tragic aspect is intergenerational transmission of literacy. That is, illiterate parents often cannot ensure education for their children. And also, even today, India remains largely rural with nearly 69% living in villages, but urbanization is increasing steadily. This shift is transforming livelihoods, consumption patterns, and social relations. Rural India is no longer purely agricultural. Many villagers now work in non-farm sectors and commute to towns. The media and technology have connected villages to urban lifestyles and aspirations. Now, the loss of common property, resources, and lack of rural jobs push people to cities, and cities also offer anonymity and relative social freedom, especially for marginalized groups. And urban population is concentrated in a few large cities, putting pressure on infrastructure. Yet politically, India remains deeply rural in character. India was the first country to adopt a population policy in 1952. The emergency period showed the dangers of coercion. Since then, policy has shifted towards welfare, choice, and education. And India is moving towards slower population growth. Thought momentum will keep numbers rising. We are approaching a post-transitional phase. And the National Health Policy of 2017, this policy focused on improving healthcare access and life expectancy and reducing mortality. It reflects a shift from population control to human development. India's demographic story is a mix of opportunity and challenge. A young population can be strength, but only with inclusion, equity, and planning. Demography is not just about numbers, it is about people and their lives. So, with this, we come to the end of today's lecture on population structure and demographic changes in India. If you look carefully, India's population story is not just about numbers, it is actually a story of transition, opportunity, and challenge happening together. On one hand, India is a young nation. Our age structure gives us a huge working age population, which can become a powerful engine of economic growth, and this is what we call the demographic dividend. But remember, this dividend is not automatic. It will work only if we provide our youth with education, skill, healthcare, and employment opportunities. Otherwise, the same youth population can turn into unemployment, frustration, and social unrest. At the same time, we also saw serious concerns, especially declining sex ratio and child sex ratio. These are not biological problems, they are social problems rooted in mindset, patriarchy, and son preference. And we also discussed literacy and inequality, where progress is visible, especially for women, but gap still remains across gender, caste, region, and urban rural lines. And these inequalities shows us that development is uneven, and unless we address them, growth will not be inclusive. For UPSC aspirants, these topics are important not just for facts but for understanding how society, economy, policy, and population are deeply linked. If you understand this linkage clearly, you can write strong answers in mains and even speak confidently in interviews. With that note, we will stop here for today's class. In the coming days, I will upload the next unit, explained with the same clarity, examples, and exam-oriented approach. Till then, keep revising, stay consistent, and trust your preparation. And if you found this lecture useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.